Book of Jonah is probably the most memorable of all books. In fact, when you hear the name Jonah, what do you think of? A big fish, maybe a whale. And as we learn the story of Jonah in 4 chapters, we really see the heart of God for the world, the desire of God for people to be saved and rescued. The story of Jonah begins as a prophet of God is told, hey, go to Nineveh and I want you to give them a message. Repent, turn back to me. And why is this important? Because Nineveh is this great city and a part of an Assyrian empire that Jonah despised. He hated them, probably because the people of Nineveh had tortured and even killed some of his family members. And so Jonah, in his flesh, said, I'm not going to Nineveh. I don't want them to be saved. So he goes a different way. He boards a ship and he's headed in the opposite direction. And I want you to see that the book of Jonah shows us first and foremost that there is a consequence of sin that leads to a downward spiral. In chapter 1, we see that Jonah went down to Joppa. Then Jonah went down into the ship. Then Jonah went down into the lower parts of the ship. And then Jonah went down into a deep sleep. And then finally, Jonah went down into the bottom of the sea. Jonah's decision to rebel against God, disregard God's command, led him to a state that he never would have dreamed that he would be in, the belly of a whale. But it's in this belly that God grants Jonah grace. Jonah prays to God. Listen to his prayer. He says, I called out of my distress to the Lord, and he answered me. I cried for help from the depth of Sheol, and you heard my voice. And Jonah gets this second chance. Aren't you glad that God gives a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance, a 1,000th chance to follow him? And Jonah does that. He runs to Nineveh afterwards and preaches a very simple message: repent, repent, turn to God. Well, the Ninevites, they listen and they turn, at least for a generation or so. They turn back to God, and Jonah gets upset. Because Jonah says, God, I knew that you were going to do this. I knew you were going to save them. Can you imagine getting upset because God is gracious? God is loving? Well, this was Jonah's heart. And notice the word that God gives him at the very end of chapter 4. He said, should I not have compassion on Nineveh? And he's going to describe the children in Nineveh. But that's a powerful statement, powerful question for us today. Should God not have compassion? That's a question for us. Should we not have compassion on the world around us? You see, the book of Jonah is not just a story of a fish. It's not just a fish tale. It is a story of missions, the very heart of God for the world to be saved. And ultimately, Jesus Christ would be the greater Jonah. Not a man that would disobey, not a man who would run, but a God-man who would come willingly to die and go into the lower depths of the earth and rise again so that we might be saved. Why? Because God has compassion on us.